The Catholic Church has produced some of the most powerful men in human history: popes, kings, emperors, inquisitors. But throughout the centuries, certain women refused to bow. They were threatened, imprisoned, burned, silenced. And yet, history remembers them. Joan of Arc, the teenage peasant who led armies and defied bishops. France, 1429, a country torn apart by decades of war with England. The French army is broken, the king is weak, hope is nearly gone. And then, a 17-year-old peasant girl shows up. She cannot read, she cannot write. She has never held a sword. But Joan of Arc claimed she heard the voices of Saint Michael, Saint Margaret, and Saint Catherine, and that God had chosen her to save France. The generals laughed, the bishops questioned her, the king tested her. She passed every test. Joan led the French army to a series of stunning victories that turned the entire war around. Men who had fought for decades followed a teenage girl into battle, because something about her was undeniable. But power doesn't like to be outshone. In 1430 she was captured, sold to the English, and put on trial before church authorities on charges of heresy. The most serious accusation? That she dared claim direct inspiration from God, bypassing the authority of the church entirely. The trial was corrupt. Her prison guards were soldiers, not nuns as church law required. When she appealed directly to the Pope, the bishop in charge denied her request and continued the proceedings. She was burned at the stake on May 30th, 1431. She was 19 years old. But here is what history could not bury. 20 years later, the church retried her case and declared her completely innocent. And in 1920, nearly 500 years after they burned her, the Catholic Church declared Joan of Arc a saint. They burned a saint. Let that sink in. Catherine of Siena, the woman who scolded a pope and won. Most people spend their whole lives too afraid to correct their boss. Catherine of Siena wrote letters scolding the pope. Born in 1347 as the 24th child of a large Italian family, Catherine never had formal education, never held any official title in the church. She was a laywoman, a third-order Dominican, and yet by her 20s, she was writing to cardinals, kings, and the Pope himself, with the kind of authority that made powerful men stop and listen. The Pope at the time, Gregory the Reth, that abandoned Rome and settled the papacy in Avignon, France, surrounded by luxury and political influence. The church was falling apart from the inside. Catherine wrote to him directly. She called him out. She told him to stop being cowardly and return to Rome where he belonged. She called him our dear sweet Christ on earth, and then told him he was failing. Gregory the Reth, one of the most powerful men in the world, listened. He returned the papacy to Rome in 1377. Historians credit Catherine as a decisive reason why. She was 30 years old. Catherine of Siena was later declared a doctor of the church, one of only 4 women ever given that title. She didn't just defy powerful men, she redirected the course of church history. Hildegard of Bingen, the abbess who confronted emperors and exposed corrupt clergy. In the 12th century, women were expected to remain silent in matters of theology. Hildegard of Bingen did not get that message. Born in 1098 in Germany, Hildegard was placed in a monastery at the age of 8. She would spend the rest of her life there, but what she built from inside those walls was extraordinary. She was a composer, a scientist, a physician, a philosopher, and a theologian, at a time when women were permitted to be none of those things. But what made powerful men truly uncomfortable was her prophecy and her willingness to use it. Hildegard went on preaching tours across Germany, something almost unheard of for a woman in that era, openly calling out corrupt clergy and church leaders by name. She wrote hundreds of letters to popes, emperors, archbishops, and kings, criticizing their moral failures without hesitation. When her own monastery's leadership tried to block her from founding a new convent, she claimed a divine vision commanded it, and eventually forced them to relent. When church authorities tried to silence her community near the end of her life, she fought back with a fierce written defense and won. She died in 1179 at age 81, having never once softened her voice for any man. In 2012, Pope Benedict XVI declared her a doctor of the Church, making her one of the most officially recognized female theologians in Catholic history. A woman who was told to be silent is now one of the Church's greatest teachers. Christina of Marquiat, the medieval woman who escaped marriage, prison, and a bishop, all for God. This one you've probably never heard of, and that's exactly why we're here. Christina of Marquiat was born in 1096 in England. As a young girl, she visited St. Albans Abbey and made a private vow. She would devote her life entirely to God. No marriage, no man. Her family had other plans. They arranged her marriage to a nobleman named Bertrand. When Christina refused, her parents tried everything: persuasion, manipulation, even locking her in rooms with men hoping she would give in. She didn't. Then a powerful bishop named Rainulf Flambard, one of the most influential men in England, became obsessed with her and attempted to assault her. Christina escaped by tricking him and slipping out of the room. Her family, furious, pressured church authorities to force the marriage through. A local bishop ruled against her. Christina appealed. She found allies in senior church figures who respected her conviction. She lived in hiding for years, in tiny cramped cells, in secret, rather than submit. Eventually the marriage was annulled. Christina of Marquiate became a renowned holy woman, founded her own priory, and cultivated a spiritual friendship with the Archbishop of Canterbury himself. She won, not with weapons, not with wealth, with will. The poor Clares of Geneva, the nuns who held the last mass in a city being torn apart. Our final story isn't about one woman. It's about a community of women who together became the last line of faith in an entire city. Geneva, 1535. The Protestant Reformation is sweeping through Europe like a fire. In city after city, Catholic churches are being stormed, sacred objects destroyed, priests driven out. When the Reformation reached Geneva, nearly every Catholic institution collapsed, except one. The Poor Clares, a community of Catholic nuns, refused to leave, while mobs attacked churches around them. While priests fled and Catholic men submitted or converted, these women stood firm. Their convent became the only place in all of Geneva where Catholics could still attend Mass. For this they were harassed daily. Men came to their convent singing vulgar songs, shouting at them, trying to intimidate them into converting or abandoning their faith. Some of the nuns had been beaten by their own newly Protestant husbands for remaining Catholic. Young women were banished from their homes by their fathers. Their leader was an elderly abbess named Louise de Rambaud. Yes, Mother Rambaud. She led her sisters through years of persecution with extraordinary calm and defiance. They documented everything. Their witness survives to this day in a text called the Short Chronicle. They were not soldiers. They had no political power. They were cloistered women who had taken vows of poverty. And they outlasted every powerful man who tried to break them. 5 women. 5 centuries, 5 different battles. Joan burned at the stake and declared a saint. Catherine, who redirected the papacy with a letter. Hildegard, who preached truth to emperors. Christina, who chose God over every powerful man who tried to own her. And the Poor Clares, who held the last flame of faith in a city that had forgotten it. The church has always had men at its altars, but it has always been carried forward, in its darkest moments, by women who refused to let it fall. If this video moved you, subscribe, share it. Because some stories are too important to stay buried.